Muy buenas noches. When I am invited to talk about our region, about Central America, I always try to explain the main cause of all the serious problems that we have been facing for centuries. People tend to think that the problems taking place in our part of the world are problems that could be considered quite new, recent problems. But we have been facing the similar problems along centuries. But 6 years ago, I was invited to develop a research program for the Institute of Human Rights, the Inter-American Institute of Human Rights. And the main objective was to show if having elections in Central America, we could reach peace in the region. You may imagine that we, Costa Ricans, know Central America pretty well. We know Central America because we are right there. But at the same time, because we have been facing a lot of difficulties with neighboring countries' regimes, and because we have been also being involved in the history of Central America as part of it. We are Central America. We are part of the region. We were placed there by God, and we cannot run away from the Central American problems. I'm saying so because many Costa Ricans think that we could avoid all the problems in the region, forgetting about them. This is a very typical human attitude, trying to avoid problems, not facing problems. But we have to face the Central American problems because they affect Costa Rica as they do with the other Central American countries. We are part of a very small region in the world, and we have to realize that our responsibility is to work together with our brothers and sisters in Central America, and that we have to struggle for development and especially for peace in the region. When I talk about Central America, I always try to explain the main causes of our problems. All of those problems are related to our geopolitical situation. When the Europeans discover the American continent, they were not coming to this part of the world. They were trying to reach the Asian countries. And right at the middle of the road, they found the large continent. For many years, they tried to go across it. And finally, Vasco Núñez de Balboa discovered the Pacific Ocean on September 25th, 1513. Discovering the Pacific Ocean was a kind of a new discovery of the world. If you pay attention to this map, you will notice that the American continent is the only one solid continent on Earth coming from the northern pole almost to the southern pole and dividing the world in two. The American continent divided the world, and as I used to say, divided history. The discovery of the Americas created a new approach to the global situation, a new approach for development, a new approach to go from the past to the future. This long continent dividing the world in two, which goes from the north to the south, provides humanity a way to unite the globe. And that way is across our part of the world, Central America. And since the discovery of the Pacific Ocean, we Central Americans, for almost 500 years, we have been facing the struggle, the fight between the European powers. Right after the discovery of the Pacific, the British challenged the Spaniards. They wanted to control certain areas in the region. And that's why today, when you go to the Caribbean area, when you visit the islands, when you visit the Central American countries, you find all kinds of people that have come to the region from all over the planet. You find the Europeans and Chinese, Africans and pre-Columbian tribes. You find all kinds of religions, languages, cultures. The Caribbean and Central America is a kind of a microcosmos in which we have all kinds of people. It's a point, a circle, a place for encounter of cultures. If you go to the Central American region and the Caribbean islands, you will find that we have the presence of all the powers of the time. We have the presence of Spain, France, Britain, Holland, and the rest. If you study the history of our region till the end of the 19th century, you will discover that our area was a kind of a battleground for European powers. Many people ignore that even certain areas in Central America were part of the British Empire till the end of the 19th century. When you visit Nicaragua, you will find that people living in the Atlantic coastal area, the Caribbean area, they speak English. The reason is very simple. They were part of the British Empire. And Nicaragua controlled that region as late as 1895. The Mosquito tribes, the Rama tribes, and some other tribes in the region used to be in permanent contact with London instead than Madrid. The coastal areas of Nicaragua are a proof of the control of the British in parts of Central America. The same thing I could say about what we call Honduras Britannica, British Honduras, the today's Belize. Belize became part of the British Empire because the British wanted to have a kind of an approach on how to go across the Central American Isthmus, on how to go to the west through Central America, and on how to unite their empire through the Central American Isthmus. If you go to the Caribbean, you discover that all those powers of the time have been occupying Caribbean territories, And the main objective they have been having for 500 years is to be close to the Panamanian Isthmus. When you study history and the political development of our region, you will find out that the Spaniards conquered the islands first. From Cuba, the Dominican Republic, I'm using today's names, Puerto Rico, they were able to jump to the continent, but not to the solid continent of the north and the south, but to the Panamanian Isthmus, because across it they were able to reach as far as the today's Chile and the today's Oregon state. The Spaniards were able to conquer the American continent going across the Panamanian Isthmus, the Central American Isthmus. If you pay attention to what the Spaniards did in order to control that part of the American continent, you will find out that from the island they went across the isthmus, and from the isthmus they were able even to go to the Philippines. So the Spanish Empire grew because the Spanish control on the Central American Isthmus. Along the years, some other countries tried to do the same. They tried to control islands in the Caribbean, to control certain areas in Central America, to look for a way on how to go across the isthmus, and because they knew that doing so they will be able to get a total control of the continent. But the most clear example of what I'm saying is what happened in the Caribbean right after the 1901 British-American Treaty. In 1901, the British and the Americans signed a treaty in accordance to which the British were supposed to keep control on all of the British colonies in the region, and that the U.S. will be in control of the Central American Isthmus and the roads across the Caribbean. After 1901, the Americans decided to open or build the Panama Canal. They had already, since 1849, an interoceanic railroad going from the city of Colón in Panama to Panama. So they were able to use the isthmus for trade purposes and for military purposes. Because of Central America being of so importance for the world, we have been the powers of the time battleground. When I talk about the history of Central America, I have to talk about 500 years of war. And you cannot solve the Central American problems unless the powers of the time contribute to peace. We cannot solve the Central American problems unless we Central Americans could be able to control our most important natural wealth, which is being an isthmus. We have no gold mines, but we own a very narrow strip of land uniting the world. So unless the powers of the time contribute to peace in Central America, we will never be able to reach peace, because the battles we are facing are somebody else's battles. We provide the labor, we provide soldiers, and we are given weapons from abroad. After 1901, we had the same experience with the Soviet Union. The Soviets tried to do exactly the same the Americans did. Because you know that after the construction of the Panama Railroad, the conquest of California was possible. So the Americans repeated the same experience that the Spaniards had had 300 years ago, 300 years before. In 1960, the Soviets began trying to control the region, beginning from the Caribbean. We used to call Puerto Rico the sentinel of the Caribbean. We used to call Cuba the gate to the American continent. So the Soviets tried to control the islands, and after controlling the island, they went to the isthmus again, repeating the same experience and trying to do the same. So every X number of years, we have been facing a confrontation between the powers of the time, trying to control our part of the world. And as you know, it's easier to negotiate with small countries than to negotiate with large and powerful nations. So when I talk about Central America, I used to repeat that we have been divided from abroad. If you pay attention to the region, you will find that we are 7 countries in a very small piece of land. And if you study the geographical characteristics of the region, you will find that our countries, one way or the other, provide a way to unite the 2 oceans. We have been used for the benefit of foreign nations. And unless these foreign nations leave us alone, we will continue to face war for many centuries to come. I try to be very clear and realistic. I try to tell you what it is going on in our part of the world. But I cannot blame only foreign powers. These foreign powers, along centuries, have been looking for local support. And they have been able to find this support within the local population. The wealthy groups in Central America have been contributing with the foreign nations in trying to establish this connection between them and the metropolis in order to be able to grow, in order to be able to trade, in order to be able to control the different countries in the region. So I always blame my people. I do not blame only those trying to conquer, but particularly those making the conquer easy. I do not blame those trying to buy people only. I blame those able or ready to be bought. And we have been facing this problem along centuries. And we have been creating very wealthy groups in our different countries in the region, groups that have been able also to control the countries together with the local armies. The fate of Central America is also very closely linked with the behavior of these local wealthy groups. And today, we are going through a different experience, which is terribly hard. These groups own the mass media, and they control all kind of propaganda, and they control politically the Central American countries. The oligarchs in the region are also responsible for these 500 years of war. They have been trying to control, and they have been successful. After telling you so, all these historical experiences of Central America, I have to talk about Esquipulas II. For the first time in our history, the heads of the 5 Central American countries, and you need an explanation first. We call Central America to the original Federation of Nations, born right after the independence. The 5 Central American countries used to be a federation. And you know what the British did when we organized the federation? They refused to recognize the Central American government. They tried to encourage the division of the different provinces in different nations. And they were able enough to convince the Central Americans that they should work by themselves, forgetting about their neighbors. And they also did the same way the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, does today. They recommended the different groups controlling the provinces of Central America not to get together, because if they go to London by themselves, they will be much better treated. So this is part of our experience. When I talk about Central America, I have to tell you that we know the reason for our division. We do not include Panama as part of Central America because Panama was a province of Colombia. The Panamanian territory became independent after the Bolivar Wars. And Panama as a republic was invented by Theodore Roosevelt at the beginning of this century because it was easier to negotiate the construction of the Panama Canal. Excuse me for saying so. You know I love the Panamanian people, but this is a historical truth. Panama was invented and created as an independent nation because it was easier to negotiate with a tiny, weak nation than to negotiate with Colombia. At the beginning of the 19th century, Colombia was very strong and was part of what we could call the area created by Bolivar. So Colombia had the support of some other countries in South America. But creating Panama, the Americans were able to negotiate the construction of the Panama Canal to receive a part of the Central American territory, which makes the number 8 division in the region, the Panama Canal Zone, and to establish something which had been affecting our region very much, the concept of uniting the world under foreign control. So the idea that a canal should be and could be built only if a foreign nation owns part of the isthmus became a reality. In 1910, when the Panama Canal was built, it was the beginning of a new era. The world changed. In 1990, the Panama Canal is totally obsolete. It's narrow, slow, and the world knows that a new canal should be built very soon. A level canal, if possible, uniting the two oceans. And many of the problems we are facing now in Central America are originated on the idea that the new canal should be open and should be open very soon. Many people think that this new canal should be open before the end of the century. And they have been even talking about opening it with nuclear explosions. They have been uniting the Panamanians, the Americans, and guess who else? The Japanese, because they think that uniting the Panamanian territory, the American technology, and the Japanese financial resources, they could be able to build this new canal soon. So we are facing a new experience, the experience of being attacked in a different way. Military attacks are not very popular today, but financial attacks are always very nice for many people. Central America is now getting ready for the opening of a new canal. And because of the Panamanian problem, the Noriega's problem, the Japanese are beginning to go to Nicaragua, talking about the Nicaraguan canal, because this is the second alternative. So we will continue to be divided from abroad. And at the same time, we will continue to suffer the problems caused by the local wealthy groups, powerful groups. When we talk about Central America, we have to remember that working for peace is not only working for our own peace, but working for freedom, independence, and particularly working to convince the powerful nations of the planet to leave us alone. When the Esquipulas II agreement, Esquipulas II as we call it, was signed in Guatemala 2 years ago, we interpreted this agreement as the beginning of a new age. It was the first political decision taken by the Central American countries on behalf of their own development. We knew when our heads of states signed the Esquipulas II agreement that we were going to suffer a lot of interference from abroad. Becoming free is not easy. In this time, very difficult time, in which the polarizing policies of the superpowers have been closely related to the will of the weak people. My feeling is that if we want peace in Central America, we have to resort to Esquipulas II. We have to support it. We have to fight for it. We have to work for it. We have to be able to convince people like you that it is better to have a friend than to have someone subject to control through military means. When I talk about Central America, I always mention that in Central America, the U.S. has the most friendly people on earth, the Costa Rican people. And I try to explain the reason for this friendship. Number one, it's a very warm relationship between the two people. Number two, we have never been invaded. So when we see Americans coming to our country, we see friends coming to Costa Rica. We haven't suffered the experience of the military presence in more than 140 years. The William Walker invasion took place so long ago that people do not remember. And it took place beginning in Nicaragua, and the Costa Rican army fought the invaders at the Costa Rican-Nicaraguan border. So they never came to the center of the of the country. And so we are friends because we know that friendship is a positive attitude, and because we see no threat coming from the north. So it is better for the State Department to understand that friendship could be built with a nice attitude, not only with the military presence. It is very, very positive for the U.S. politicians to understand that we, Central Americans, and particularly we, Costa Ricans, are ready to work together with them if they respect us. Let's talk a little bit about peace. For many people, peace is a mere ceasefire. And you see many people talking about ceasefire these days. For us, ceasefire is just the very beginning. Peace is based on justice, on social justice, and on international social justice. If you want to see a peaceful Central America, you have to contribute to the development of our region, particularly through fair prices, fair trade, and technological transfers. I am tired as a Costa Rican to see American politicians try to solve our problems writing checks. I am tired to see American politicians trying to conquer the goodwill of the Central American people with money. This money will never reach the majority of the people. This money will be kept on behalf of the so-called development, which benefits mostly the very wealthy people of the country. You will never see aid coming through this thick layer of people ready to receive it in cash to keep it, and in weapons to distribute, because they really distribute the weapons. When I talk about Central America, I have to tell you that we want to know what it is going on in the United States, what is the interest, the prevailing interest of the American people. My feeling about the problem is that we have been experiencing a very positive transformation. A very few years ago, probably 10 years ago, it was not possible for a Central American to come to this country and to talk with a large group of people as I'm doing today. Because even 10 years ago, we were not known. When I was in office, I received a visit of a member of the Senate of the United States. He spent 10 days with us. A very nice gentleman. And as soon as he arrived, the American Embassy in Costa Rica provided him a place close to one of the most beautiful beaches in the country for him to stay. And when he was about to come back to the States, he wanted to say hello to me. And when he arrived to my office, he told me, "You know, Mr. President, I've been having a wonderful week in this beautiful island." So I was really surprised. After 10 days being in Costa Rica, he continued to think that we were an island. We had not been known in the world, maybe because we are very weak, maybe because we are very small, but now the American people is paying attention to the Central American problems. And I have to thank you for that. Your interest is a clear demonstration that the world is changing. Your interest is a real demonstration that transformation is taking place. Many people in this country know that Miami is closer to Costa Rica than to Ames. Many people in the United States have come to realize how close we are. And we are sending, and you are harvesting, one of the most serious problems we Central Americans face today, the refugee. We need all these people living our part of the world. We need all of them for our own development. But they have to leave our part of the world because they have to look for food and shelter. And they go abroad looking for that. It's the repetition of history. The metropolis is attracting millions of people. This is a repetition of history which we could stop only developing the poor nations of the world. It's a repetition of history that we should stop if we want a peaceful relationship between North and South. Many people are afraid to talk. And as you have seen, I am not. I think that we have to talk very clearly and in a very open way if we want to solve the problems of war and if we want to achieve the benefits of peace in our part of the world. Central America is very poor, but it is very close. We're struggling for development. We Costa Ricans abolished the army 41 years ago. We abolished death penalty in 1882. We abolished slavery in 1825 because we wanted to contribute to social harmony. We wanted to build a society in which all human beings could grow free and full of hope. When I talk about peace, I have to relate it to hope. We Costa Ricans are hopeful. We are proud of what we have been able to do along centuries. But we know that unless we contribute to develop hope and development in our neighboring countries, we will suffer all the effects of war. When we come to the United States to talk about Central America, I have to tell you, we are so close that we better build our common future together. I would like to get some questions from you, some remarks and comments. All comments will be most welcome. Spanish colonial times, the population of Costa Rica was very low. It was a bridge uniting North and South. And if you go to the Panamanian border, Costa Rican territory, you will notice that the prevailing culture are those that have come from the South. And if you go to the northern area of the country, you will find that the Mexican cultures were just arriving when Columbus arrived to Costa Rica in 1502. So the population was very low since the very beginning. There is an estimation of 25,000 people when the Spaniards arrived to Costa Rica.